Why do a documentary about the alarms? Hasn't their story been covered many times before? I suppose, yes, this is true, but I still feel that questions remain. Questions that could only be answered by the people themselves. How did it go so far? What was going on in their heads as it all fell apart? And, of course, the biggest question of all, the mystery that no one has solved. What happened to all the money?
One, two, three, four.
So I met Carl when we were working the shop together. I won't say the name of it because I can't remember it. It's one of those shops that sells board games, scented candles, little ornaments, magic eye posters, a whole lot of crap, you know? Not many people came into the shop, so we'd just be chatting, you know, like we were both 18, just finished school, and neither of us are going to college. Carl said because he thought it was a waste of time and money. Like, why pay someone to read books to you know? And me, because I didn't have enough points. But we discovered that we both had similar tastes in music. I suppose at the time, everyone else was into Britpop and grunge, but for some reason that just didn't do it for us, you know? We were into the older stuff like soul, punk, glam rock. Carl could play the bass and, well, I could sing a bit. And I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but we just started jamming one day, you know, when the manager wasn't there and there was no customers. We just went into the back and started messing about and singing some old Spencer Davis songs, you know? At first, like, we kind of kept the whole thing quiet and would only play when there was no one else around, but after a while, we just got a bit lax about the whole thing. We'd play in the actual shop, you know, even while we were serving customers. Carl would be sitting there on the stool playing bass and I'd be behind the cash register singing along. I had this little trick, right, where I used to get the cash register to ping in time with the music. Yeah, we got fired. And rightly so. Carl was a bit pissed off, but I could see the manager's point of view. I could see both their points of view. I mean, it was different and interesting, but also slightly unnerving to have the staff singing "Give Me Some Lovin'" at the top of their lungs while you're trying to buy a Japanese hat stand. We looked on our getting fired as a bit of a wake-up call. So we decided to give this band thing a go. We got Carl's brother's tape player and we recorded our first song, Fill in the Blanks.
I can see by the way you were dancing that we'd have a lot of fun. I can tell by your pretty smile that you really are the one. I don't need to know your life story, I'll just fill in the blanks.
After we listened to the song a couple of times, it slowly became clear that we needed more than just bass and vocals. You know, I mean, there's a reason why most bands have guitars and drums, you know? And I'm glad we learned that the hard way. I mean, it was interesting to give the bass and vocals thing a go. Ultimately, unlistenable, but interesting.
Know your name, I'll just...
I knew a guy who could play drums.
Yeah, I knew Paul from being in the same circles. I was connected to a lot of people at the time. That's what I was into, you know? Just getting to know loads of different people. That's where, you know, I started to get the name, The Link. Now, I don't know who started that name first, but it definitely stuck. I mean, there's some people that didn't even know my real name. They only knew me as The Link.
Greg was a friend of a friend, you know. Every time I met him, he'd talk about how great he was at playing the drums and all the great times he had with all his previous bands. You know, that was the great thing about Greg, you know. He had a lot of enthusiasm, particularly for himself.
Paul was a good guy. When he came to me and he said, "Link, we're forming a band and we need you," I said, "Sure, let's play some music."
Then we needed a guitar player. I'd known Charlie for a couple of years. He was going out with my sister. Unlike Greg, Charlie never actually mentioned that he played guitar. And my sister's one of those girls that takes hours and hours to get ready, so we'd just be chatting and playing snails while we waited for her.
Oh yeah, Street Fighter 2, yeah. We used to sit there for hours and talk about really interesting stuff like, why don't they, instead of windscreen wipers, why don't they have hair dryers on the front of your car? Because if you think about it, or what would lemonade taste of if there was no such thing as lemons, you know? Or how long could you go for without touching your nose? 1 hour and 25 minutes.
Yeah, he had a lot of interesting theories, but he never really talked much about himself. I mean, the only thing I knew about him was that he spelt his name with the Y.
Charly.
Which I thought was original. A little pretentious, maybe. But then I heard him play guitar, and it all made sense. Charly. One day, we're waiting for my sister, and I mentioned that we were looking for a guitarist, and he says that he used to play guitar.
Oh yeah, I used to play guitar. I still do.
I didn't even know what Charlie did in the day as a job, and it turned out he did nothing. So he agreed to join the band.
Yeah, cool.
And we had guitars, vocals, bass and drums. Now we just had to bring those elements together.
Yeah, Carl's Elwyn used to work during the day. So they had a back room in the house that was fairly soundproof. So we used to practice there all the time.
The first rehearsal was good. We had slight problems with Greg's drumming.
See, the guys found it very difficult to come to terms with how he was playing the drums at first, you know? I'm an instinctual player. I've been playing the drums for a very long time, and I was bored with those simple 4-beat structures, you know? I was trying to bring drums to new places, beyond rhythm.
It took us at least an hour to figure out that Greg had actually never played drums before. I mean, he played with such confidence that we just couldn't believe that he didn't know what he was doing. He was just pretty much hitting the drums at random, you know? But maybe that was a good thing. You know, I mean, his style was certainly original.
After a while, you know, the lads did start to catch up with me.
After a while, Greg got the hang of it.
Yeah, it was good fun. Paul and Greg and the girl.
No, it was Carl.
Oh yeah, Carl, with the moustache.
I don't think so.
He was a cool guy. Whatever happened to him?
We practiced a few more times. Things were going well. I mean, every time we practiced, we got a little bit better. Then someone brought up the idea of doing a gig. I personally didn't think we were ready, but some of us were pretty sure that we were.
We were on fire. We needed to share this thing with people. It wasn't fair on our fans not to be gigging. Obviously, we didn't actually have any fans yet. But I like to think of everyone as a fan. They just don't know it yet.
I kind of thought that we should have a few more songs before we did an actual gig. I mean, we had roughly 2 songs at that stage. But we made them go on for quite a while, so yeah, I suppose we were ready.
Our first gig was in a club. The manager wore a hat.
It was a club in the centre of Dublin called Red World. I mean, everything was red. The floors, the ceiling, the chairs, the pillars, even the lights. It was nice, I suppose. Quite difficult to walk across the floor after a few drinks. People were often walking into walls and getting trapped in corners.
So, who got you the booking?
Greg.
Everything is red. Like, amazing place. Just walking around is crazy. And that was a really exciting venue. The lads just couldn't believe that I managed to get us in there.
The red place, yeah. That was horrible. I felt like I was inside my own eyeball.
Well, opinions differ. I'm pretty sure not many people turned up, but I think Greg maintains there was a good crowd.
Well, it's hard to tell how many people were there. There could have been a lot more people there. We just couldn't see them because they were wearing red.
Which was fine. It was more the experience that was important than the size of the crowd. Well, we hadn't even advertised. Nobody knew who we were, so there was no point in sticking our name up around town when nobody knew it. Not even us, as it turned out.
The MC came in and asked us what we were called. And we all said something different. We looked like a bunch of fucking idiots.
I thought we were called the past participles.
We had definitely agreed on Nelson Mandela and the dickwads.
Oh yeah, it was something about a fox, wasn't it? Or no, wait, a badger. No, which is the one with the teeth? A marmalox. Is that a real thing?
I don't think so.
Oh.
And I think Carl thought we were called the Revengers, which is some reference to some old play. Carl was a good man for reading stuff.
Oh, we argued about it, and no one wanted to back down. I think the band could have ended there.
Then Charlie spoke up. He'd been saying something about cats and dogs, which none of us understood. And then he said, the alarms.
Then I said, the alarms.
The fire engines.
The alarms.
The alarms.
I think he just read it off the safety sign on the wall. But the MC was getting impatient, so we just went with it.
We were on second.
The guys before us were really good.
Support act were shy.
Backstage, we discussed which song to open with. Now, there wasn't much choice, obviously, as we only had the two songs.
Eventually, we agreed to open with Let's Just Be Friends, Friends That Do It. And we saved Fill in the Blanks for second.
We're too good together. We're too much fun. We shouldn't mess this up. What we've got is the one.
This is a very different version to when we played at the gig.
This is worth a whole lot more.
Especially the bass.
Than another little fling.
And
You fuck it up.
obviously it's about 10 minutes shorter.
She said, let's just be friends.
Listen to the drums on that bit.
Let's just be friends. Let's just
Did you hear it?
friends that do it.
Did you? You did. I'm gonna reward it for you.
Let's just be friends. Let's just be friends. And I replied, let's just be
Class
friends.
it is.
Friends. Friends that do it.
In the end, we played Let's Just Be Friends twice because we couldn't really remember Fill in the Blanks properly.
Yeah, it felt good to be on stage. Felt like that's where I belonged, you know? If I could, I'd live my whole life on stage. I actually pitched that as an idea to a few television executives a couple of years ago. I want to have this audience follow me around. Just watch me live. It would be fascinating.
Yeah, it was great. Just so high in adrenaline, I find it hard to remember, to be honest. I do have three memories. Running on stage and going straight off the front. Greg knocking over the hi-hat. And Charlie trying to crowd surf on just one guy and ending up kneeing him in the face.
It's weird. Sometimes I'm not even sure it was me that was up there that night. But I'm pretty sure it was. Otherwise, why would I have the memories and stuff?
When we got backstage, we were buzzing. Literally. I had these like weird pulses in my arms and in my legs. And I looked over at Carl, he's just staring at the ceiling, shaking. I mean, his whole body was shaking. And then we caught each other's eye. And we just burst out laughing.
It felt like a beginning. It felt like we had begun. And the only question now was, how far are we going to go? And if things hadn't turned out the way they did, it could have been a totally different story.
Then this little fella walked in.
He was a big guy, not just in size, but you could feel him. You know, you could feel his presence.
He was wearing an expensive looking suit. And he had a gold watch which he flashed around the place.
I liked his hair. It reminded me of Jimmy Stewart.
He told us he was a manager.
Put that light down, lower it. I've been at this fucking thing for years by the time I found them. And sure, I was down then. But that's the nature of this business. Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. Now, the last few things I've been involved in, they hadn't turned out well. So I was looking for a new energy, a new enthusiasm, an innocence. As soon as I saw those boys on that stage, I fucking knew. They were the people I was looking for. So, I went backstage to meet them.
You just stood there, not saying a word. Well, none of us said anything either. Just sat there staring at him, staring at us. I was about to tell him to fuck off out of the dressing room. Thought he might be some kind of a weirdo looking to queer one of us. But then he said,
Gentlemen, I am a band manager, and I think yous are fucking great. And I'm gonna make you into stars. Yeah, somehow bollocks like that.
he told us he had some contacts in record companies. And he was going to pay for us to do a demo in a proper studio and take it to them.
He didn't want to be our manager yet. See, that was the thing. He said that if he couldn't get us a record deal, then he didn't deserve to be our manager. So we wouldn't have to sign any contracts until we had a deal.
He said his piece. Then he said he'd wait outside for us to discuss it.
Once he'd left the room, we turned to each other. I thought it was a pretty good deal. But Carl wasn't so sure. He wanted to wait until we had done a few more gigs and had a better idea of where we were going. Greg was of the opposite opinion.
I wasn't that impressed. I could see he wasn't all that he appeared to be, right from the start. Look, I played along with the rest of the lads because they were all so excited. But really, wasn't that impressed.
A pointless waste of shit paper. Yeah, I think that's what he called Carl for suggesting that we stop and think about it. Charlie, on the other hand, was non-committal.
It's like when it's only raining a little bit and you don't know whether to put your jacket on because it'll keep the rain off, but it'll also make you really sweaty. And then you do put your jacket on and you discover you have half a chocolate bar in the pocket.
But Carl was still unsure. Now, I'd normally side with Carl because Carl's such a smart guy, but I just felt like we couldn't lose. You know, if we got a record deal, then great, and if we didn't, well, then we didn't owe him anything. We voted on it, 3-1, and we accepted Bossman's offer.
Yeah, that was one of his things. Wouldn't tell us his real name. He insisted on being called the Big Bad Boss Man. What a knob.
He even had business cards that said the Big Bad Boss Man. And he had a mobile phone number on them as well. He had a mobile phone, like, what more proof did we need?
There's always a risk when you hire experienced professionals, you know? People who know what they're doing. Sooner or later they get round to thinking, oh, what the fuck do we need this guy for? Just do it all ourselves and keep all the money. That's when it starts to get ugly. No. I was looking for people who didn't know what the fuck they were doing. And these guys seem perfect.
A mobile phone, like. Nobody had a mobile phone back then.
Yeah, the recording of the demo went well. The studio was not all that we hoped it would be.
Shithole. Literally. It was a disused toilet in the back of a pub that was closed due to an infestation of rats.
Which gave us quite an interesting sound.
Oh yeah, the studio in the Jacks. That was a good idea. They should do that more often. It was very convenient.
There was only one microphone. So we had to record all the different bits individually. It took fucking ages. I mean, I suppose we should have been suspicious of this fella saying he's a manager. Been in the business 20 years, and he didn't know that you needed more than one microphone to record a song. unless you wanted a mono, just fucking bent.
Yeah! Come on!
Carl acted as producer and sound engineer in this one. I think he did a good job. He wrote it, so it only seemed fair that he'd take charge.
Bossing people around.
It's good. It's a shame we couldn't have it on the album.
What's the song called for?
Come On Baby, yeah. No, what am I saying? Yeah, come on, baby.
Work it. 2, 3, 4. Get up now. Get up now. Get up now. Baby, come on.
Tensions were brewing though. You know, Carl still had his doubts about the boss man, and I was starting to get the feeling that boss man wasn't too happy with Carl.
The little fucking shitbag. Too fucking smart for his own good, him. He was questioning everything I was doing. Everything. I needed that crowd to... They had to trust me. Oh no. No, he had to fucking go.
Our first clue that Bossman was trying to get him out of the band was the promo photos.
Yeah, the boss man wanted us to do these promo shots. Said they really impressed the execs. That showed them with the full package, you know, showed them we know what we're doing.
When we got the photos back, they were slightly biased. When Carl saw the photos, he was raging. He said it confirmed all his suspicions. I tried to calm him down. You know, I told him it was just a mistake, that everything would be all right. And there was no way we were going to kick him out of the band. He was just being paranoid. But he wasn't.
We kept practicing every day around the Carls. I remember one day the neighbours came around and complained. Well, were they crazy? We were just getting better and better. And here they were getting a mind-blowing gig every day for 5 or 6 hours for free. And they came around and complained. We should have been the ones that were complaining. No matter how we turned up the amp, we could still hear their baby shrieking away.
We were rehearsing there one day, and the boss man rang us and said a guy from the record company wanted to meet us. He said that he'd heard our demo and loved it. We were delighted.
Some people may wonder how we believed we could get a record contract after only one gig. But what people need to understand is we were fucking deadly.
Boss man picked us up 10 minutes later from outside Carl's and drove us down to the record company's offices.
The offices were similar to the recording studio, a dive.
It was like some old warehouse or something. I liked it. You know, it had a nice vibe. Reminded me a little of the Goonies.
I sold him some line about it being like cool and sexy to have your offices in like a dark, dingy, condemned abattoir sort of place, you know? And that seemed good enough for them.
He led us through these dusty old corridors. And
There, in a room at the back,
Was the man we knew as Nigel Lee, the big-time record executive.
I have one of the hottest acts around right now standing in front of me, and you need to put your money where your mouth is. I didn't know anything. I didn't. I was a lorry driver at the time, so I wasn't into all this sort of thing. I knew the man, so I said all right. But I'd no intention of...
Mr. Lee's office was pretty much the same as the rest of the building. Dusty cement floor, unpainted brick walls, just a desk and a few chairs situated under the one light, which was just an uncovered light bulb hanging from the ceiling.
it was a weird office, yeah, but most offices are, you know. Well, not most offices, but some. I won't name names now, but I know a fellow who has 10 capuchin monkeys in his office. Now, I wouldn't want to work in an office like that. I don't think that's conducive to a healthy working environment. Did get his meetings done very fast, though. Oh, no, wait. That was a cartoon.
he hit his head off a light bulb when he got up to welcome us in. We set the whole thing swinging in a very disorientating way. We sat down. He waited for the bulb to stop swinging, and he offered us a drink, which we accepted.
That was a mistake. I'd have to admit that to you now. Because, if you'll excuse my French, there was fuck all in the office apart from a table and some chairs. But it just seemed appropriate. It would have been rude of me not to offer them a drink. Even though I didn't have it there. If you see what I mean now.
He looked through the drawers in his desk and then just ran out, bumping his head off the light bulb again.
Well, what the fuck was he doing? I didn't even know if he was coming back. We're all sitting there, and 5 minutes later he comes running back in, he's all sweating, he's got a can of 7-Up, which he hands to one of the lads and says, there, share that with the others. What a fucking idiot.
Mr. Lee seemed kind of unsure of himself. which wasn't exactly the kind of behaviour you'd expect from a big-time record executive, you know? It was as if he'd never done this before.
The fucking idiot didn't know what the fuck he was doing.
Now, hold on. Let's get this straight now. I brought them in, sat them down, told them how much I liked their promo. Promo. I told them how much I liked their promo, and I wanted to offer them a 3-record deal.
And then all doubts were forgotten. A 3-album deal. I mean, this was the dream.
Right there. Laid out in front of us, head in the pillow, legs in the air. Metaphorically, he didn't actually do that.
Yeah. Sounded good to me. A 3-album deal. It would have been difficult to share the 3 albums amongst the 4 of us, but I didn't even have a CD player, so we probably could have come to some kind of an arrangement.
But, there was one condition.
The player of the bass guitar is not good enough. He has to leave the band.
It was like a punch in the stomach. I mean, how could he say that?
Carl was a perfectly adequate bass player.
Carl, with the moustache and the hairy neck, that Carl. Oh yeah, and he played bass, did he? He was a cool guy.
But before any of us could react, Bossman was on his feet. How can you say that? You can't kick Carl out of the band.
Of course I objected. I couldn't have them thinking it was my idea. Then they would have just turned against me. So I pretended to be disgusted with the whole idea. Obviously. But then the retard starts getting confused.
Then he started shouting at me. I didn't understand. Had I done it wrong? So then I says, okay, the fella can stay in the band. That made him even more angry.
It wasn't that complicated. All he had to do was follow a few simple instructions and ignore everything that I said. Is that too difficult for him? But then he starts backing down. Now what am I supposed to do?
We thought we got our own way. But then Bossman starts talking about...
Although you are a top record executive, and you know what you're doing, and I know it's impossible to change your mind once it's made up.
No, I will not change my mind. The bass player is out of the band. Otherwise, there's no deal.
Now that I think about it, I did see Bossman nodding to Mr. Lee, but at the time I thought he was just looking for some more 7-Up.
I'll expect your answer by tomorrow. Thank you, gentlemen, and goodbye.
Then he leaves the office. He didn't even remember that it was his office. We were supposed to leave his office. I mean, that's just basic office. I mean, what the fuck? He was a fucking idiot. Jesus fucking Christ. He was a fucking idiot.
You know, thinking about it now, I don't think Mr. Lee was really Chinese.
There was dead silence in the van on the way back. Carl just sat there staring at his shoes. He knew. Well, we should have all been dismissing the idea. You know, saying, no, you're integral to the band. We're nothing without you. There's no way they can kick you out. But we didn't. So he knew. He knew before I knew. I still thought that there'd be a chance that we could come up with a solution. Bossman dropped us into town and we went into Mickey D's to discuss it.
I could have gone either way, to be honest with you. It wasn't an easy call. In the end, I went with chicken nuggets.
It was a record deal. You don't turn down a record deal. I didn't want to be sitting around when I was 40 thinking I'd blow my chance. How many bands never get a record deal?
I don't know.
Well, exactly. Because you never heard of them.
I thought we could maybe sign the deal and then get him back in later. And I said it to Carl. But he didn't say anything. He just picked up his burger box and dumped it in the bin and walked out.
I got the call the next morning. They'd kicked him out. Now, I knew I had them. I had to find them a new bass player so that they could get around to recording the album and get that out of the way. This time, I was looking for someone who would keep them in line, not another voice of dissension. No. I was looking for someone who would distract them from thinking about things too much.
We couldn't rehearse in Carl's back room anymore, apparently. So the boss man set us up in an old garage around the back of some flats.
We met up a couple of times, but it just wasn't the same without Carl. There was a lot less bass.
There's something about the bass. You don't notice it when it's there, but you kind of miss it when it's gone.
A couple of days later, boss man rang me, and he said that he'd found a new bass player for the band.
So we arranged the time to meet up at the rehearsal room and have a bit of a jamming session.
There was a knock on the door, and boss man came in with this girl.
I don't know, I always used to hear the bass. I guess most people listen to the singer or the guitarist or the drums, but I just always heard the bass. I guess some people have to. That, and I really fancied Sting. The guy seemed really nice, which was surprising because Bossman had told me that the record company had forced them to kick their old bass player out. So I wasn't really expecting a warm welcome.
Yes, Kate was nice. Kate was very nice.
She was cool. I liked her bass.
Chicks on bass, man. Chicks on bass, they fucking love it.
Love what?
That's, you know.
We had a bit of a jam, and it worked really well. I mean, obviously it wasn't the same as having Carl there, but Kate had different stuff to bring, right? We taught her, this is just a clip show, and she nailed it.
The guys were all really good, and they had some great songs. What was that one? The lyrics don't matter as long as it rocks. That was really good. I was really happy. And they did a 3-album deal. It's not often you walk in the door and have a 3-album deal and 3 really great musicians laid at your feet.
After a few hours, I came back and asked the lads if they were happy with her. I already knew the answer to that question. As soon as I brought her in, I could see they all had huge boners for her. Metaphorically.
She was really good. I mean, she played the bass well, and it just felt right, you know? I felt like we were all really connecting.
She obviously had a bit of a crush on me.
I liked her hair. Reminded me of John Wayne.
All thoughts of any past little fucking arsehole bass players were long forgotten.
Well, I was thinking we'd practice more and, you know, do a few more gigs before we went into the studio, when we knew where we were going as a band. But the boss man said, no, we had to get into the studio ASAP because we wanted to capture the immediacy that we had as a band as soon as possible.
In that instance, he was right. But it was obvious. We were ready. Let's do this thing.
Let's get this thing over with.
Greg was definitely up for recording the album now. And so was Kate.
Well, whatever the guys reckoned.
And so was Charlie.
Yeah, cool.
We got into a decent studio this time.
Guy owed me a favour. He hadn't owed me a favour when we were recording a demo a few weeks previously, but in the meantime, I made sure that he did.
And we had a real producer as well. Kind of.
Mike.
Look into my heart. Can't you see it's crying? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was an interesting album. They were like an uncut diamond. You know, it was all there, all the beauty. It just had to be revealed. And the only way to cut a diamond is with another diamond. Which I've never understood, really. I mean, if the only way to cut a diamond is with another diamond, then surely the 2 diamonds are just going to start cutting each other, and then you're going to end up with just a load of diamond dust.
I don't think he'd actually produced anything before. It took him a long time before he stopped calling the mixing desk the board with all the little slidey yokes on it.
It did take half the first day for him to realise that he was the one who was supposed to press record. I mean, that story is true.
Well, what is a real producer? I produced the album, therefore I am a producer. Every producer has their first album, and The Alarms was mine. Okay, so I never had any formal training, but I don't believe in that kind of stuff. You know, that kind of stuff just sucks your creativity by telling you how to do things correctly. Only training I ever needed: listening. And I've been listening all my life.
Another numbskull. In a way, it was my fault for hiring these idiots, but in another way, it was their fault for being complete fucking morons. What's so hard to understand? Fucking get it done.
The recording of the album was pretty fast. The boss man kept on talking about the immediacy. The immediacy. Then Mike started picking up on his mantra.
I came into the studio one day and I could see Boss Man talking to Mike inside the control booth. Then Mike comes in and points at me and just says, "Start playing." So I did. I just put a bit of a riff together and it sounded pretty good. Then he points at Kate and Greg and they started playing along. And then he set up a microphone for Paul and he says, "Start singing." But Paul's like, "But I don't have any lyrics." And Mike says, "Just sing." So he did. And it was amazing. Right there, we came up with a great song. When we finished, we were all like, "Let's play it again, let's play it again." And Paul's like, well, hold on. Let me just figure out the lyrics first. But Mike's like, "No, that's it. The song's done. Next song, let's move on." And that song became Financial for
I don't know why little girl, something like me and her now, something soon gonna come. I don't know why I keep pointing finger.
I was sitting in the studio talking to Paul, and Charlie was in the corner just messing around with his guitar. Then Mike comes on the intercom.
Another song done.
Yeah, this one going down to the shops. What do you want again? Is it a bap or was it a rap?
No, you know them, the rolls, like the soft rolls.
Yeah. That wasn't pressure from the boss man to get it finished. That's what I do. I try to unleash the latent creativity of a band, you know, whatever band it is I'm working with at the time. I started that process with The Alarms, and I've continued to pursue it with the bands I've worked with since. If an album is 40 minutes long, why should it take any longer than 40 minutes to record? Yeah, even a live album, it's usually cut down from a longer set, you know, recorded over a number of nights, and then mixed over what can be weeks.
That's what I'm constantly trying to pursue, the perfect album, which takes exactly as long to record as it does to hear. You know, I once tried to record an album in half the time it takes to listen to. It didn't work out.
In all, it took 4 days to record the album. Yeah, that's pretty fast, but if anyone was going to record an album in 4 days, it was us. Of course, we could have got it done a lot faster if all my songs hadn't been rejected for no reason. I had a load of songs and none of the lads liked them.
Why didn't they like your songs?
They were too advanced, to be honest. I think it was just the words and the symbolism were just over their heads. See, I have the songwriting ability, you know, and I have to use it to my utmost. I can't dumb down my songs, you know. Words are my language.
Can you give us an example of one of the names of your songs?
Woman, get off my back, get into the sack. Nice bum, let's have some fun. Can I put it in the pool place? Beauty is only skin deep, but so is my cock.
I actually co-wrote one of the songs. That was really good fun. Lady, you're old woman, boy, you're some kind of man. Paul and I wrote it together. We were just messing around in the studio one day and he started singing some lyrics to me and then I started singing back.
You've got some handsome hands.
You got an elegant stance.
You never have class.
You got a sexy back.
Yeah, Paul was a really nice guy and a really great songwriter too. I don't know how he managed to do this. Most of the lines here, Paul actually came up with the first time we started playing it. We were in the studio one day and I started singing a line and Paul would come up with a line that rhymes, which I think is pretty amazing. Charlie's really nice and yeah, Greg's nice too once you get past his bravado. But I think I really got on with Paul the best. You know the way sometimes when you find you have so much in common with someone? Sometimes it feels like you're the only person who feels a certain way, and then you stumble across someone else who feels that way too. Well, as I got to know Paul better, it started to feel like we were really becoming great friends.
We only had 7 songs going into the studio, but we soon found that the songs were just flowing out of us. So I wrote this one on the last day recording. It's the last song in the album.
What is this feeling down in my chest that won't let up and give me some rest? It's you, this condition I'm under.
It's not about anyone in particular. It's just a general feeling about it would have been a mistake if any of us did anything to jeopardize the band. I mean, we thought that we're on the verge of something great. I mean, how could we mess that up? And I'm glad that none of us did. At least we can say that.
Yeah, I banged her. I suppose I can say that now. It was inevitable, really. It was just, at the time, we had to keep it away from the other lads, They would have been pretty mad if they found out.
Yeah, we had a bit of a thing, me and Kate. I didn't tell the other guys, but we got together a couple of times. And I had sex. With each other. At least I'm pretty sure we did. French girl, yeah?
No, nothing ever happened between me and any of the guys. I thought they were really sweet, but no.
Well, maybe we didn't actually have sex. But, I mean, look, at the time I was having so much sex that it's very hard to remember exactly who I didn't do, What I tend to do is that I usually presume that I have had sex with someone until proven otherwise.
Well, in a way we did. If you think about it. We did in my head. So, after all, isn't that what really counts?
Once we laid down Echo My Heartbeat and we were happy with it, that's when we knew we were done.
11 tracks.
38 minutes, 42 seconds.
Tunes and stuff.
We all sat in the control room and just listened to it.
The drums sounded great. Everyone just loved them.
It really came together. It felt like an album. Well, obviously, because it was an album.
It sounded a bit like Vivaldi's Four Seasons, with all the tunes and stuff.
When the album finished playing, we all just sat there. Nobody said anything. Charlie just got up and put it on again, giving us a little nod as he sat back down.
We listened to it over and over for 4 or 5 hours, This was ours. We'd made this. And we just wanted to share it with people.
Yeah, it was good. 4 days. 4 days isn't bad for a first attempt. And we could have got it down to 3 if we hadn't wasted all that time tuning the instruments. People always say to me, Mike, Van Morrison recorded Astral Weeks in 2 days. And I always say to them, yeah, but he's a knob.
The next day, the boss man came into the studio, took a copy of the album off to Mr. Lee to have a listen. And he came back an hour later. Said Mr. Lee loved it. He was ready to release a single.
When it came time to choose the first single, we ran into problems.
So the guys all wanted Lady You're Old Woman, Boy You're Some Kind of Man to be the first single.
It was fun and boppy. And for once, the band was in agreement on something.
Well, for once, the band agreed with me on something.
But Bossman was determined I'm So Bored of Originality should be the single.
Oh, the other song's far too long.
Just get in, get out, and leave them wanting more.
He brought Mr. Lee back in to convince us.
All right, I did meet them again. But that was only for... I mean, I couldn't very well not go. It would have seemed...
This time, I brought him to a cafe, so we both leave at the same time. And I told him exactly what to say, so he wouldn't get confused. Of course, he still fucked it up.
Well, it was a complicated situation. I didn't entirely understand. The subterfuge and the mind games are not my forte. I just did as the man said.
We were hoping to be able to reason with them, but it was impossible. All he kept saying was, 3 minutes is the perfect length for a single. He didn't actually say anything else.
3 minutes is the perfect length for a single.
3 minutes is the perfect length for a single.
3 minutes is the perfect length for a single. And he loved the drums on that one.
I don't even think he said hello.
He was like a fucking toy with a string. He just kept repeating the same thing over and over. He even said to the waitress when she came around asking us what we wanted.
I just told him what the man said now. I didn't ask why, and he didn't tell me why.
We kept trying to argue our case because we thought I'm So Bored of Originality was the wrong single. Although now, when I think about it, if we had released it, maybe it'd have done well.
It was a great song. This wasn't the right single. I still think that.
Put your ring on my doo-da-ma-da. Whack for my daddy-o, whack for my daddy-o, there's whiskey in the jar. Is that the one you're talking about?
No, that's whiskey in the jar.
Oh, right, yeah.
Then Kate changed her mind.
Well, the more I thought about it, the more I felt that Lady or Old Woman, Boy or Some Kind of Man kind of misrepresented the band a bit. It was the only song that I was singing on. I felt that we should have something with just Paul.
Once Kate started to side with us, Paul followed. Then the other two.
Well, it was a big hit for Thin Lizzy, so...
No. Now, I've said more than enough. You'll have to excuse me now. I think I've been more than accommodating to you. I've got a lot to do.
As soon as Mr. Lee was gone, the boss man started talking about the video.
No time to waste.
Well, that got us interested again.
The idea sounded really good.
Oh man, it would have been great, can you imagine? Well, I suppose we don't have to. We did it.
I used to act a lot as well, you know. I mean, that's why I was very interested in the video. And that's probably why it turned out the way it did. You know, I mean, I'm so convincing. I didn't mean it, you know what I mean? I mean, if it had been another band...
So, what was the idea for the video?
Well, the idea for the video was...
The idea was...
It was supposed to be...
The idea was...
You know what the idea was? That's the whole reason you're here. Why are you asking me these stupid questions?
Well, some people may not know.
How could anybody not know? It was all over the newspapers. It was on the news. It was all anybody talked about for weeks, months afterwards.
We just want you to describe it in your own words.
Well, in my own words, it was simple. So simple, it was perfect. Almost perfect.
But what was the actual...
Look, we told them that the idea for the video was that they was going to pretend to be bank robbers. We'd hire a fake bank, they go in with fake guns, hold up the place, and take all the money. I told them it'd make them look exciting, dangerous.
But what was actually happening?
Well, in reality, there was no cameras. There were no actors. The bank was a real bank. The people were real people. And the money was real money. Of course I didn't tell them that. As far as they was concerned, they was just shooting a music video. No, I didn't give a shit about this band. I'm not a band manager. Jesus Christ, I wouldn't do that. I just wanted to get some fucking money.
It sounded great. It sounded like it would have been a lot of fun. It would have been a good video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. You know, I could work with this.
Well, I think the guys were more into it than I was. But it sounded like really good fun.
Yeah, we spent about a week learning how to do crowd control and use the guns and all. Which is fine by me. You know, I mean, I'm a method actor. So I was really into that, but I think the other lads got a bit sick of it.
Well, it did seem extreme. I mean, we spent more time preparing the video for one single than we did in recording an entire album. You know? But I suppose when I look back on it, it was good experience. I mean, those are good skills to have.
Kay was particularly good with guns. Very competent. Very competent. And sexy.
Then came the day for the video.
Boss man picked us up from outside the studio in his van and drove us down to the location. Oh, yeah, he seemed quite nervous, you know, a little bit jumpy, but I thought it was because there was so much money riding on the video.
He pulled the van up outside the bank and turned to us. Right, he said, we've only got one take at this, so don't fuck it up.
We all had our jobs. Kate was in charge of the staff. Greg was in charge of the customers. I was in charge of the money. And Charlie was in charge of the stereo.
I had to press play as we entered the bank so that Paul could mime along to the song lyrics.
That's why it had to be 3 minutes, so we'd be in and out.
Boss man said we were going to have one of those playouts, which was very popular at the time, you know? So the song's over, but the video just keeps going for a bit. This meant that when we got back to the van, he couldn't be there because he'd be in the video. So Kate became the driver, yeah? So they'd film us speeding away with the sound of sirens in the background, and we were supposed to head straight to Mr. Lee's office.
I used to drive a van for a florist's. I guess that's one of the reasons he hired me.
We waited in silence for a moment, and Bossman was looking out the window and pretending to be listening on an earpiece. And then he paused, turned to us and said, "Action."
We jumped out the back of the van and ran into the bank. It was pretty exciting. The adrenaline was really pumping.
But as soon as we got into the bank, we just froze. It just didn't feel right, you know? No one was even looking at us. Then slowly people started to turn around and take a goo. And then it was just, no one knew what to do. It was just everyone looking at each other. I was thinking, what are they doing? Shouldn't these extras be throwing their hands up in the air and freaking out and everything? And then it was like, where did boss man hire these clowns? But then it hit me. I knew what was going on. I knew what was wrong.
I'd forgotten to press play. I felt like such an idiot.
As soon as Charlie hit play, it jumped us into action. I mean, this was it. This was our entrance into the pop world. We had to get it right. So Greg started telling all the customers to get down on the floor against the wall. And Kate started pointing her gun at the staff.
I've been working in banks for 12 years now, and I've been involved in 5 robberies. Theirs was certainly one of the stranger ones. Well, I couldn't figure it out. Was this a tactic to confuse the police? I didn't really understand why bank robbers would play a rock song while robbing a bank and mime along to it at the same time. I'd never seen it done like that before.
That made it quite difficult to tell people what to do. I mean, I'd be in the middle of telling the manager to open the safe, then the lyrics would start up again and I'd have to start singing.
It wasn't going well. Progress was slow. After a minute, we hadn't even got the safe open.
Then one of them pulled a guitar out of a bag.
The guitar solo always seemed a bit over the top to me. You know, it sounded great in the song and all, but just the idea of someone pulling out a guitar to do a solo in the middle of a bank robbery didn't seem very realistic to me. I mean, come on, would that happen in real life? Okay, obviously, it did happen in real life, but, I mean...
Yeah, the guitar solo did seem to confuse people, but I just presumed that they hadn't been briefed on it. It did give me more time to tell the manager to get the money out of the safe, though.
After my solo, I helped Paul put all the money in the bags. It was a lot of money, and it looked really realistic.
I was slightly distracted by all that money. You've seen it before in films, but when it's there in front of you, it's quite captivating. That's how she got me.
Well, as I said, I've been involved in 5 bank robberies. You develop a sense for these things. This just didn't seem right. They didn't seem very dangerous. They didn't really seem to have a clue what they were doing. So I grabbed the girl, took the gun out of her hand and pointed it at all of them, and they just stood there looking at me. None of them knew what to do.
Well, the fuck was she doing? This extra gone fucking insane.
The song was nearly over. We didn't have time to mess about.
Well, obviously she thought she was some girl, you know, who could write herself into the video and someone's going to watch it and think she's a big ride and bring her off to Hollywood to put herself into a movie. Typical. Well, that's what I thought at the time. As it turns out, in fact, she is a ride and I ended up marrying her.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was going on. Then Paul saved us.
I just thought that boss man must have set it up to add to the whole excitement of the thing, you know, to keep us on our toes. I didn't realise that there was any danger. I mean, if I did, I wouldn't have done anything. But I didn't, so I leapt for her.
As he leapt, I pulled the trigger. I didn't really mean to, I just panicked.
The bang was loud.
And then silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Everyone looked at Paul. He was just frozen there with the look of shock on his face. For a moment there, I thought we were going to have to go for a second take.
That was very brave of her, to shoot me like that. I don't think I would have had the guts.
Luckily, I hadn't hit him.
It was blanks, of course. At the time, I thought it was blanks because we were shooting a video, but actually it was blanks because Bossman didn't want us shooting ourselves or any of the customers by accident, which was nice of him.
Paul grabbed the gun out of her hand and turned it on her.
I was pretty scared then. I thought I'd misjudged the whole thing. I thought these people weren't dangerous, but now with the gun pointing at me, I was starting to think again. But then he leaned forward and he whispered in my ear, "Pretend to fall." And then he put his hand on my shoulder and gave me a gentle push, and I don't know why, but I did actually pretend to be pushed backwards. Well, it was better than being shot anyway.
It was all wrong, all wrong. We totally missed the end of the song, but Bossman had told us whatever happens, keep going, so we just ran.
They got the money and they ran out. We were all left speechless. A couple of the other staff members helped me up and we just stood around wondering what had just happened. It was one of the strangest robberies we'd ever witnessed. It took a full minute for Mr. Farrell to remember to hit the alarm button. People have since asked me, did they seem like idiots when they were in the bank? And I have to say no. I just thought they were mentals.
We got into the van and Kate started driving. All things considered, I thought it gone well, but Greg wasn't happy. He said he wanted to go again because he hadn't felt it.
Yeah, I felt I could have done better, you know. I just hadn't been in the moment. It didn't feel real to me as an actor. Obviously, again, but it was real.
I looked over at Paul to see if he was happy with it, but he was just staring at the floor. Then he looked up.
He turns to us and he says, "Hey, did anyone notice any cameras in there?" Now, obviously, I noticed that there was no cameras in there. But Paul was the first one to say it, but I was about to say it, though.
Then Kay pointed out that the actors didn't really seem like actors.
Charlie opened the bag and took out some of the money. It wasn't fake money. It looked real.
Greg didn't want to believe it.
Look, I was just asking a question. I was just saying maybe. You know, maybe the cameras were hidden. And maybe the extras are really good. And maybe they got real money for the video. It was important to consider both possibilities. That's all I was saying.
Greg was right, though. It did seem far-fetched. I mean, could we really have just robbed an actual real bank?
That may seem obvious to everyone now. It may seem like we were pretty stupid to have fallen for it, but you weren't there. You don't know about these situations until you're in them. It's like shooting an enemy, or jumping in front of a bus to save a friend, or just realising that you've robbed a bank for real when you thought you were pretending to rob a bank for the video of your first single off your new album. You don't know until you're there.
We needed to figure it all out. We needed to get the van off the road. So we pulled up a lane and there was a shed there with the door hanging off it, so we could see that there was no one in it. So we drove the van into it and pulled the door over behind us.
Now we had to figure out what the hell was going on.
We turned on the radio to see if there's any mention of a bank robbery on the news.
The news came on and we listened to the different stories. It went to sport and there'd been no mention of any robbery.
I started to feel pretty stupid. How could we have thought that it was a real robbery?
Then I went back to the newsreader with some breaking news. 4 people had held up a bank in central Dublin in the last hour.
Oh shit.
We were screwed. What could we do? We were screwed. We were up shit creek without a paddle. Listen, forget that paddle. We didn't even have a bow. We were just treading water in a creek of shit. You know, with big shit sharks circling around, big shit sharks with big shit teeth. Sorry, can we stop for a second? I just need to use the toilet.
We'd robbed a bank. I mean, what could we say? Sorry, we thought we were shooting a music video. Yeah, actually, that's probably what we should have said.
We hadn't worn masks or anything in there. Anyone in that bank would have been able to pick us out of a lineup.
How could we, you know? We were so close. You know, we had a record deal. We had a great album. This wasn't the way it was supposed to go. No, this wasn't our destiny.
All the excitement and energy we'd been feeling the last few weeks turned to despair. Then Paul came up with a plan.
Well, I thought, why not pretend it was a publicity stunt? You know, we hold a press conference and go, ha, we got you, and then hand all the money back. We were first-time offenders. They might slap us on the wrist, but any court case would be more publicity for the album.
I thought to myself, yeah, cool.
I didn't want to go to jail. Not with my looks.
It sounded like a good plan to me, but then I'd never accidentally robbed a bank before, so I didn't have any experience to judge from.
We voted on it, and the decision was unanimous. Although that was possibly because no one could think of any other options.
The question was, what were we going to do about Bossman? Or what was Bossman going to do about us? He was going to want his money, so how was he going to try and get it?
Then we thought of our families. You know, like me ma. Like, could he get to them? Now, luckily enough, he'd never got our addresses or anything. He'd never come to our gaffs or picked us up or anything.
Apart from one of us.
Oh yeah, Carl. With the moustache. And the hairy neck. And the lopsided eyebrows.
Oh, that was it. That was the one thing he had in us. So we knew that's what he'd do. We had to get over to Carl's as fast as we could.
We couldn't use the van, obviously.
Now, I wanted to get a taxi.
It was a good idea. We just didn't have enough money for a taxi.
We didn't have enough money. We had too much money. That was the whole problem.
Well, we couldn't just go taking some of the money. I mean, where would that get us?
Look, there was tens of thousands of pounds there. No one was gonna notice if some of it was missing.
Well, I just thought it might be a bit risky getting a taxi. I mean, our faces might have been all over the TV by then. But Carl was in danger, so it was important we get there as fast as we could.
We decided to leave Charlie there with the money. It was too dangerous bringing it out in the streets. And if Bossman was there, we'd lose our only ticket out of this mess. So we told Charlie to sit tight in the van and count the money, while the rest of us went out and tried to flag down a taxi.
The taxi ride was pretty uneventful. As we pulled up outside Carl's house, my heart was in my mouth. All the way over in the taxi, I just kept thinking about all the things we could find here. Bossman had killed Carl as some kind of warning. Or he was torturing Carl to get him to tell us where we were. Or he was hiding behind the door waiting to shoot at us as we walked in. I just didn't know what to expect. We paid the taxi driver and got out of the car and looked up at Carl's house. And I remember seeing that the front gate was open. And I tried to think back, does Carl usually close the gate? Or does he leave it open? I had no idea. We walked up the garden path and rang the bell, and there was no reply. And then I remembered that the bell didn't work. So we knocked, and there was still no reply. We went through the side passage to the back of the house. The back door was locked, but it was one of those doors that had those little panes of glass in it, so we smashed one with the rock, and I reached in to try the lock. The key wasn't in the lock. But it didn't really matter, because Carl had hit me with a tennis racket at that point anyway.
Paul jumped back from the door, clutching his arm. I thought it was Bossman, maybe he'd shot him, but the door swung open and this other bloke was standing there. It wasn't Bossman, and I didn't think it was one of his henchmen either because he was wearing pyjamas and clutching a tennis racket, which seemed kind of unusual for a henchman.
Carl had been out the night before. He missed the whole thing. So when he heard us breaking in his door, he thought we were thieves.
There wasn't any time to waste, so while I explained to Carl what happened, Greg put the kettle on and Kate went to call her mum to tell her that everything was okay.
Mum was fairly hysterical, but that's pretty much her default state. She'd seen the footage of me on the news. I told her everything was fine and we were going to be all right, and that we were going to go to the police now, but I just had to make sure that our manager hadn't had our previous bass player killed. That didn't seem to reassure her much, though. She made me promise to go back into the florists on Monday and ask for my old job back before she'd let me hang up the phone and go back to the lads.
After I'd explained what happened, Carl didn't react well.
He threw a friggin' wobbler.
Interestingly, it wasn't so much that we'd thrown him out of the band on the say-so of a criminal who had tricked us into robbing a bank. It was more the fact that we'd now dragged him back into it.
We'd come here to save him. And this is the thanks we got. So what if he wasn't in danger before and now he was? That's not the point.
What is the point?
That he's an ungrateful bastard.
We were told him that we were worried that Bossman might kidnap him to get to us. But as Carl explained, you can't blackmail someone if they can't hear you. And Bossman had no way of getting in touch with any of us, so taking a hostage wouldn't do him any good at all. There was no way he was going to come over here. It was a good point.
But I did turn up.
As soon as we heard the front door being broken in, we were all up and out of there in seconds. We didn't wait around to see if he had a gun or anything. And as it happens, he did.
I was sitting at the far side of the table from the door, so I was last out. As I was going through the door, I heard a loud bang and wood splintered above my head. I guess it was the shock that made me stumble. I lost my footing, crashed into some patio furniture and hit the ground.
It wasn't very chivalrous of me. I should have made sure she was okay first, but I was too busy running. I heard a crash, and it wasn't until I got to the end of the garden that I realised that Kate wasn't behind me. I turned around and I saw her lying there on the patio. She wasn't getting up.
I was winded, I couldn't get up.
Greg was already over the wall.
And I'd already made sure the other side of the wall was clear.
And Carl was halfway over it. I turned to go back, but I saw a boss man coming back out through the back door. Carl shouted for me to grab his hand. I didn't want to leave Kate there, but I did. A part of me was thinking, what's the point in both of us getting caught? He has a gun, we can't fight him. And another part of me was thinking, run. So I grabbed Carl's hand, he pulled me up, and the two of us fell over the wall.
We were in the lane, and we started to run, but then Bossman started shouting.
I told him to throw the money over the wall or it hurt the girl.
I shouted back that we didn't have the money.
I'll kill the girl.
We'll get the money, don't hurt her.
You've got 2 hours. I'll be waiting for you in the warehouse. Mr. Lee's office, Jesus Christ.
So we walked away, and when we got around the corner, Carl started giving out to me. Said I shouldn't have waited. You can't blackmail someone if they can't hear you. If I hadn't listened to Bossman's demands, then he'd have no reason in keeping Kate.
Which was my point exactly.
But who knows what he would have done then, if he didn't need her.
We got another taxi back to Charlie in the van.
I finished counting the money by the time the lads returned a couple of hours later. We had £317,450. Give or take 20 quid.
We told Charlie what had happened.
Oh yeah, Carl was back.
Then Carl spoke up.
He asked us, how well did we know Kate? And where did she come from?
Bossman had brought her in, hadn't he?
Carl said he'd seen her for, and he said it did look like she didn't try and get up. She waited on the ground, and she waited for Bossman to get there. Now remember, she made a phone call from Carl's house, yeah? Now maybe she told Bossman where we were.
It finally all made sense. Kate had agreed with Bossman and Mr. Lee when we'd been choosing the single. And she'd been really sexy with the guns.
Well, it was obvious. I mean, the idea had occurred to me, I just hadn't said it yet. It was amazing to have somebody saying exactly what you're thinking. You know, because I thought of that.
Man, I thought she was cool, but...
I didn't believe it. I mean, how could Carl know that she was in on it? How did he know for sure?
And her name wasn't Kate. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but I got a glimpse of her driver's license and it said her name was Catherine.
It was boss man's backup plan, in case we figured out what was going on. See, he needed somebody on the inside to bring us back to him.
But we couldn't take that chance.
Carl had seen her fall, and she hadn't tried to get up.
I'd seen her trying to get up. I was sure I had. I tried reasoning with the guys and tried to get them to change their mind, but Carl had convinced them.
Everything seemed to fit now. I guess I'd always been a bit suspicious of her. Carl was a smart guy. I mean, he'd been right about the boss man, hadn't he? He'd always been a bit suspicious of him, and he was right, wasn't he? Yeah, he was, because he got us to rob that bank.
The guys wanted to continue with the press conference plan. I couldn't believe it. I mean, how could they just forget about Kate like that?
This is our one chance of getting something out of this. If we give them the money, then we have nothing. If she wasn't in on this, then when soon as boss man sees the press conference, he'd let her go. There's no point going to jail for murder if the money's already gone. And if she was in it, then fuck them both. Let's just call his bluff.
We voted on it, 3-1. We'd go ahead with the press conference. We called the press and tell them to meet us in half an hour. Carl wouldn't come on stage with us as he wasn't in the band anymore. Instead, while we were talking to the press, building up the excitement, he'd be backstage on the phone to the boss man, tell him that it was too late and to turn the telly on. Then he'd bring the money on stage and we'd make the grand unveiling.
The press conference? Where was that again?
We decided to hold the press conference outside the bank, because it'd be convenient to give the money back to them.
Carl and Greg went out to make the phone calls to the press, while me and Charlie waited with the money.
We went to a phone box and we called as many TV stations and newspapers as we could find. And once we managed to convince them that we genuinely were the lads and we were going to give the money back, they were pretty interested in what we had to say. And we were the hot story.
Your company has been accused of selling rabid dogs to OAPs. Would you like to comment on that? The Alarms were one of the most vicious gangs I've ever covered. They were ruthless. They would have stopped at nothing. I knew that when I heard they played that song in the bank. That was the key. Only a bunch of psychopaths would do something like that. I said it then and I stick by it today. They might have convinced some people there were innocents in the whole thing, but I know the real truth. And you can read all about it in my book, For Whom the Alarms Toll. The call came through to my desk. I presumed it would just be another prank caller, but as soon as I heard that chilling voice, I knew this was the real deal. My throat went dry. I had to play this just right, otherwise I'd scare them off.
Yeah, Roger Bentley. Now, he's a real asshole. He's always trying to make out like we're a bunch of mentalers or something, so he can sell more of his books. We're not a bunch of mentalers. We're not. Tell you, it makes me want to smash his face in.
Through some careful negotiation, using techniques which I've built up over years of crime reporting, I tried to convince them to meet me. I was taking my life in my hands, but it just had to be done.
I wanted to meet him. He keeps trying to make out like it was he that convinced me. That's what I called him for. I was holding a press conference. It took longer to tell that idiot where to meet us than it did anyone else.
Eventually, I convinced him to meet me outside the bank in half an hour. Armed only with a pen and paper and a photographer, I left for the bank.
I waited with Charlie, but I just kept thinking about Kate. I mean, it was too risky to be messing around with someone's life. Now, I know we voted 3-1 on taking the money to the press, but I just felt like I had to take things into my own hands. I guess I shouldn't. I guess I hoped that the guys would forgive me for helping someone that was in danger. But of course, they haven't forgiven me.
Paul and I were waiting in the van for the other guys to return. We were talking about the way a car is like a snail's shell, except with wheels and a motor, and you can fit 4 or 5 people in them. And then Paul was looking at the money and he picked one out and he said, "Look, it's smaller than normal money." And he was right. It was. Paul said he needed to take the money to show the other guys. He said I should wait in the van and guard it. And then he got out and left.
I ran as fast as I could. There was no turning back. And when I got to the corner that led to the main road, I heard Greg and Carl coming the other way. So I ducked in behind a bin, and then when they'd gone, I just kept on running.
When we got there, Paul wasn't there. Neither was the money. Charlie looks up with one of those weird expressions of his.
Where's Paul? I said.
Shouldn't we be the ones asking that question? Paul had run off with the money. We knew where he'd gone. Back to the boss man. So Carl said he'd go and stop Paul. He told us to go back to the bank and stall the reporters.
I made my way to the warehouse. I was pretty nervous about carrying all that money by myself. I felt that people were looking at me strangely, you know, nudging and pointing. My face must have been on TV by now, and surely someone would recognise me and try and take the money off me. I didn't want to be a rock star anymore.
How could we say we're not thieves and then not hand back the money? That made us thieves. That's what thieves are. They take stuff and then don't hand it back.
Yeah, I was angry with Paul. What are we going to do now? We were hanging off the edge of a cliff of shit with one hand.
Sure, there were quite a few people there apart from me, including the guards. But that just made the situation even more dangerous. I could control it if it was just me and them. But with all those bystanders, it could have got out of hand much more easily.
We hung out across the road for a while. We just had to scope the situation out, see exactly what was going on, you know.
We weren't chickening out, all right? We were waiting for Carl to come back with the money.
Didn't he tell you to stall the reporters, though?
Yeah. And we were. Anticipation is the greatest staller.
We waited for a while, but then some of the reporters started to leave.
We ran up the steps and we turned to face the crowd.
Yeah, it was crazy. Everyone was taking pictures and waiting to see what we had to say. We were like rock stars or something.
It was a tricky situation. And we couldn't really reveal what we were doing there because if the cops would have carried us off, we'd never get to give the money back. But at the same time, we had to say something to make sure the reporters stuck around. I'll be honest with you. Now, I know a lot of people are going to doubt this, but I did not know what I was going to say when I went up there that day. Now, what I did say, which has become legendary, just started coming out of me. Just flowing out of me. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not often an opportunity to enhance the musical world through the brilliance of invention comes upon us from the times wherein we are. Such a time is here and now for us to feel in our being. And
the ravings of a lunatic. Classic delusional behaviour. He really talked as if he thought we could understand what he was saying. Then he handed over to his associate. This one was even worse. That terrifying madness in his eyes.
I just explained the situation. I used to play Street Fighter with Paul. Mr. Lee had promised us 3 albums, but he hadn't actually given them to us yet. And the money was too small. I just laid out the main points of it and let everyone fill it in for themselves.
This went on for some time. I guess about 10 minutes. At any moment it could have turned into a bloodbath. Luckily, I managed to control it. And for more details on how I did that, you can check out my book, For Whom the Alarms Toll. There you go. Make sure you include that last part, yeah?
We kept him there for a long time. But even I have my limits. Neither Carl nor Paul ever arrived. After a while, the reporters just started to leave one by one, till all we were left with was the cops. And they handcuffed us, put us in the back of a police car like a couple of dicks. And where was Paul? He was nowhere to be seen. He just left us there, handcuffed, like a couple of dicks.
I walked through the old building to the back to where Mr. Lee's office was. And as I got near, I crept up slowly and crouched down outside the room. I was just hoping to hear something that would tell me whether I was making a fool out of myself. I sat there for 5 minutes, but they weren't talking. After another 5 minutes, I decided that I couldn't wait any longer. Something had to be done, so I took a deep breath and stood up, and as I did, something dropped out of my back pocket. And I looked down, and there it was. Maybe I could get Kate out and get the money and give it back to the bank. Somehow we could still come out on top.
I heard a noise out in the corridor, so I called out.
Then Paul walked in the door. In one hand he had the bag of money, and in the other hand he had the gun from the robbery.
I thought it was worth a shot. Maybe we could bluff him. Obviously, the gun just had blanks in that. We both knew that. But did he really know that? Yes, but maybe I could convince him that I'd put real bullets in it. And all I'd have to do is believe that there were real bullets in it, and in a way, then there would be.
So were you worried at that point?
I wasn't fucking worried. What the hell did you take me for? Some kind of fucking idiot? I was cautious. My gun had run out of bullets, so I had to feel out the situation. Make sure I knew exactly what he was doing. Then he starts babbling about getting real bullets out of his father's shotgun. Well, then I knew. He hadn't a fucking clue what he was doing.
Slowly, calmly, he pointed his gun at Kate. I knew I was beaten. He'd call my bluff and I couldn't call his. So I threw my gun down at his feet. He picked it up. Next, he told me to throw the money over. I told him to release Kate. Not till he had the money, he said.
Paul was about to throw the money over when suddenly Carl ran in and he started shouting at Paul, telling him not to give Bossman the money. I didn't understand. Did he want Paul to just leave me there? Then he started pointing at me, saying that I was in it. It took me a moment to work out what he was saying, but he thought that I was in on the whole thing, that I was in league with Bossman. I couldn't believe it.
The two of them having a fucking domestic right there in front of me. I didn't need this shit. All I wanted was to get me fucking money so I could get the fuck out of there. Is that too much to fucking ask? Fucking fuck.
But as Bossman said, the whole debate was a little bit irrelevant at that stage. I mean, he had the guns. Unless we wanted to die, he told us to throw over the money. Well, it was a good point.
I don't know what happened. Several things happened at once. I couldn't tell you which one happened first. Paul went to hand over the money. Carl ran over to stop him. Then Bossman shot at them. Carl clutched his chest and crashed into a light bulb, smashing it.
It was total darkness and I couldn't see a thing. I crawled over to Kate's chair, but it took me ages in the dark so that by the time I got there, she was already gone. And I didn't want to call out in case Bossman was still there. I could hear noises in the dark, but couldn't tell who they were. So in the end, I left. It was all I could do, really. I thought about waiting outside for the other guys to emerge, but for all I knew, they'd already been out. And maybe the next guy to emerge would be Bossman, looking to get rid of any witnesses. So I ran to the cops, and by the time we got back, there was nothing there. No guns, no money, no bodies.
So, what happened to the money?
Well, don't look at me. I don't have it. I got nothing. We couldn't even release the album in the end. Our album would have gone straight to #1. But instead, we never got to release it. The master tapes were seized as evidence. And the boss man fled the country, never stood trial, so they were kept there. We could have been heroes, legends. And the biggest coup in the history of music. Did the Sex Pistols rob a bank? Did the Rolling Stones do it? The court cases dragged on for ages. We were made into public enemies when we were accused, and laughingstocks when we were acquitted. We were the first people in the world to be accused of involuntary armed robbery. Judge gave us 6 months suspended sentence. I would prefer to go to jail instead of outside with the public mockery. Just people in the street shouting at you. Hey, buddy, stop or they'll shoot. Your music video. Fucking, hey, it's the MTV4. Yeah, but I want to shoot a music video where they fuck you in the ass. That's the worst one.
I got into data processing shortly after that. I'd always wanted to be a data processor. I just hadn't had the belief in myself to really go for my dream, you know? Yeah, it was fun, but I don't think the music business is for me. It's all just money, 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 you know?
But who do you think got the money in the end?
What money?
The money from the robbery.
Oh, yeah. That's a tough one. Did Mr. Lee get it?
We don't know, we're asking you.
All right. Well, what about Greg? Did Greg take all the money out of the bag and then just put rubbish in instead? And he just took all the money for himself?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Is the whole band a figment of Paul's imagination? And he actually stole the money for himself, but he doesn't know that he has it?
No.
Right. Am I actually an evil genius who has been behind it all from the start and has just been playing everybody off each other so that nobody knows that I'm really behind it all?
Definitely not.
Oh, okay. Was it Kate?
Well, I certainly didn't get it. I wish I had. The florists wouldn't give me my job back because they said it would reflect badly on them having a bank robber deliver their flowers. So I set up my own florists. And it's still going strong. As I like to say, we've got branches all over the city. Because of the plants. Bossman must have the money. He was holding the bag when the lights went out. He must have just ran. He was out of the country before the police even had time to put a description out to the airports. He was gone. He's out there now, with the money.
Are you fucking insane? You think I got the money? I got nothing. I left that shitty arsehole country with the clothes on me back. I got nothing. And all because those idiots didn't know how to fake rob a bank properly.
So you never got any of the money?
Are you trying to annoy me? No, I got nothing. I never got any of that money. If I had it, do you think I'd be fucking working here?
So, who do you think did get the money?
I don't fucking know. One of them cocksuckers. Maybe the cops took it. I don't fucking know.
Who ended up with the money, Paul?
Kate.
Kate?
Yeah. I was wrong. She was in on it. When the lights went out, she must have grabbed the money and legged it. I mean, who else could it have been? I didn't take it. Bossman hadn't got it, otherwise he'd be shouting it from the rooftops. No, Kate took the money. That's how she set up all those florists. The guys were right. I mean, she had backed up Bossman's plan every step of the way. She pushed to start recording the album, to choose I'm So Bored Originality as the single, to shoot the video in the bank. She'd rang Bossman from Carl's house, and then she got trapped by him on purpose. She tricked us. I guess I was stupid to fall for it. Greg certainly thinks so, but I just wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Was that so wrong? Well, I guess it was, seeing as how it ended up with Carl getting shot and killed. Sure, I had feelings for her. But that was 10 years ago, you know? I haven't seen her since. But I thought she was great. In a way, I still do. I mean, yes, she could be devious, manipulative, and ultimately untrustworthy, but she was very good at it. If only, huh? If only we hadn't agreed to let Bossman be our manager. If only we'd realised that we're robbing a real bank. If only we hadn't gone over to Carl's. If only we hadn't let Kate trick us. If only I hadn't given the gun to Bossman, then maybe Carl would still be alive today.
If only you hadn't given your gun to Bossman.
Yeah.
You mean Bossman shot Carl with your gun?
Yeah.
But I thought you said your gun had blanks in it.
Of course I put blanks in their guns. You think I'm gonna give them guns filled with live ammunition? What, so they can point them at me? What kind of idiot do you think I am? Of course I put blanks in their guns.
So, Carl's alive? But why is he never being seen since... Unless he's in hiding. because he took the money. But then Kate, that means Kate's totally innocent. Sorry, I have to go. Thanks.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Oh my darling, I'm so bored of originality. Why won't you shut your mouth and give me reality? You got to try to change your mentality. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. Give me something simple, something easy. 'Cause there's no need to try and tease me. Why do you have to make it so tough? I'm getting tired. Enough is enough. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored. I'm so bored, I'm so bored, I'm so bored.
You've got some handsome hands.
You got an elegant stance.
You never have class.
You got a sexy back.
I really like your hair.
Right back to there.
Well, that's a great shirt.
You look good in a skirt. Lady, you're all woman.
Boy, you're some kind of man.
Lady, you know what to be me.
Boy, I just do what I can.
Lady, you're all woman.
Boy, you're some kind of man.
Lady, you know what to be me. Don't you tease me.
Easy.
You're always bright and breezy.
You got a friendly face.
You got a warm embrace.
You've a good sense of humor.
You never spread rumors.
I like the way you dance.
Your legs put me in a trance. Lady, you're all woman.
Boy, you're some